So today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, we're going to talk about a really unique issue. It's an issue that I didn't even know existed, and I don't think actually does exist. It's this topic of quote-unquote chest feeding. It's something that the CDC is now recognizing as something that should be medicated for men who identify as women. It sounds ridiculous, but it's something that's pervasive. It's coming through a number of aspects of our culture, and it's going to impact our kids. And it can put us as parents in a really dark place because we look around and we just say, this isn't real. This isn't a thing. But many in society are saying that it is. So today on the podcast, we're going to talk about an issue that is unique, that is different, but that still needs addressing. And the people that are impacted by it need our care, concern, compassion, and for us to speak truth in love. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook for some insight on this topic.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, a pair of senators are now criticizing a new CDC guidance that came out earlier this month. The guidance is for so-called transgender people attempting to breastfeed infants. The senators are Roger Marshall and Bill Cassidy, and they sent a letter to the CDC director, Mandy Cohen, saying that the new guidance did not acknowledge the limited research on transgender individuals breastfeeding babies. Now, I know, Dr. Kathy, I'm going to pause here for a second. I know you think that this might be like a Babylon Bee article or something that's made up. This is actual reality. The CDC has said that transgender people can, quote, chest feed their infants, and they may need their healthcare provider to prescribe medication so that men can induce lactation to now, quote, chest feed infants. The senators are both physicians, and they said that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has not approved any medication that would allow men who identify as women to safely, quote, chest feed. Two drugs that are often prescribed are actually off-label drugs used for inducing lactation, but they have incredible, significant FDA complication warnings. So now the senators are requesting a response. They want it by August 1st. And they're also requesting any peer-reviewed data on the safety of transgender people, quote unquote, chest feeding. Dr. Kathy, I can't believe that we're actually talking about this, but it is post-2020, so all bets are off. I don't know if you had this on your bingo card for post-2020, but this is a reality. I want to ask you a little bit on this topic. What are your thoughts here when you kind of hear this story? How should we kind of receive it? It just feels like such a awkward thing to kind of even hear that our federal government is actually working through this and we actually have guidance on how to progress here. What are your thoughts?
I'm angry and I'm disappointed because I believe there are more important things for our senators to be involved with that affect millions of people versus something that is affecting a very few people that is unnecessary for well-being. And now that you tell me that the medication they could take has significant negative effects, that's so prideful, so self-centered and selfish that they would want that. There are women who cannot breastfeed their children for any number of reasons: medication they're taking, chemo they've had, breast reduction surgeries that don't allow them to then breastfeed 10 years later, whatever. And they're fine. Those children are bottle fed and they're fine. Do I understand that breast milk can be better for the children? Yes. But oh my goodness, if it's okay for a woman to not have the ability to breastfeed and those children turn out just fine, and those women bond with their babies even though they haven't breastfed, I'm sorry, this is unnecessary, it's unhealthy. And if there is a man who needs that in order to feel okay about himself, this is a mental health issue we're trying to solve in a physical way, and it will not work.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I have to admit, when I first read this article, I thought, well, I guess I'm not a doctor. But then I thought, no, but I've had kids. We have kids in our family. Like we also, like in Minnesota, I mean, I grew up on a farm. There's just things that don't work. And if we want this, like the incredible work that you have to go through to get to that place is just dynamic. It's dynamic. It's in many ways, it's just like irresponsible, I think, with resources. You just kind of look at this and you think, I can't believe that this is actually going on. I'd like to ask you this, though, from maybe a child's perspective, too. When we kind of walk through this, and I think this is a little bit of the signs of the time, that our Center for Disease Control feels that it's important for in their work to the public to issue this guidance is just a dynamic that I think maybe as parents and as different people in the community that we should maybe take note of. When this happens in our culture, in society, what are the things that we should take note of? What are the things that we should recognize that's happening in our culture? And then maybe even, I don't know, kind of protect or maybe filter the different things that we hear coming down from these different agencies. Does this change the way that we actually look at agencies? Should it? What are your thoughts there?
That's a really interesting set of questions. I do think we should be paying attention to this. I know of people who would love to have more money spent on research for epilepsy, kind of a silent, hidden, huge issue for many, many children. What about more research for female heart disease, the number one killer of women, I believe, cancer and certain types of cancers, and so many different things? What about research for medical help for veterans who are struggling with this, that, and the other thing? But they're going to spend time and money on this for how many men? When it is not necessary, it is not life-saving or life-giving. No, let's pay attention and let's stand up. And if we feel like we can't empower decision makers at the CDC in Atlanta, I understand that. We don't have a lot of clout there, but we have influence in our community with our doctors. We can ask our pediatricians and our doctors, what do you believe about this kind of thing? And make sure we're sending our kids to doctors who are, biblical worldview, same values as we have people. And we talk with our kids so that, what if you have a son or daughter who chooses to be a doctor one day? How would you want him or her to respond to this? What if you have a child who chooses, I just met a young man who's heading for law school and he's struggling with, what if he's in a position someday where he has to defend something he disagrees with? And so how do you help your kids wrestle with stuff like that? This is what we can be teaching in our home to prepare our kids.
I love that. I love that idea of kind of even like pushing the imagination. I don't know if you call that maybe this kind of cultural imaginary muscle that we want to develop in our kids, that they can maybe even kind of forecast or perceive different things that might be coming down the pipe. And to kind of close on this, I want to do that maybe even for myself. When I look at this article, it's natural for me to kind of look at men who want to chest feed, or quote unquote chest feed. I don't think that's actually a real thing. Like that's just not a thing. Can I just say that? It's not a thing. I'm not going to use that phrase and say that it's a real thing. So I'm going to put it in quotes because it's not a thing. But when we kind of work with these different guys in our community, there's a reality that they're also made in the image of God and they're wrestling through challenges the same way, maybe in some ways, maybe the same way that I've wrestled through challenges in my own life. How should we come alongside those in our community who maybe are in favor of this? Are there like lines of reasoning or talking points or processes that we should walk through? How do you love somebody well when they're kind of in this place mentally that this is really kind of the natural thing that they think they should do? A woman can breastfeed, and so therefore I should be able to quote unquote chest feed. How can we kind of encourage our community to see the truth in this and not just kind of maybe ascribe to the lie to try to explain it? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think but it's just hard. I appreciate the questions. I think we listen longer. We make sure that we're listening to the people who we're engaging with and what do they believe and why do they believe it, so that we can maybe embrace an element of their message, if there's any truth there at all, and then massage our message so that they'll hear it a little bit differently or a little bit deeper, a little bit better. But I think, one of the best things we do, Wayne, is we just stand up and we say this is ridiculous. And just like you're saying, chest feed, like I'm glad you're not calling it breastfeeding, good heavens. chest to chest feed. No, it's ridiculous. And I'm gonna say this, and this is what I think we need to say. And not everyone will agree with me, I imagine. But I tell people all the time, you can only be who you were created to be. If somebody's a believer who you're talking with, you go back to Genesis 1:27, that we're created in God's image, in God's image, male and female, he created them. And we teach people that male and female is not just physical anatomy. Every single one of our cells carries the DNA of female or male. It's not just a body part. And you can't just add something or cut something off and change. That's why we say so-called transgendered, because we don't believe that a woman can ever really become a man. She will never really feel like a man because the brain is still a female brain ordained by God for that. So I teach kids all the time, if your parents said you can be whatever you want, they were encouraging you to dream and to work hard. And they didn't mean anything bad by that. But I think, Wayne, you know that my joke line is I could not have been a jockey on a horse. I'm 6'1". I could not have been a jockey on a horse. I would have killed the horse. It wouldn't have worked. We would have lost. It would have been embarrassing. I would have fallen off. No, I'm not designed by God to be a jockey on a horse. And I could have prayed every night, oh, Father God, make me short. And as a kid, I would have woken up every day tall, still mad at maybe myself, my parents for not telling me the truth and for God, but nobody would have, mentored me in understanding the ridiculousness of that prayer. We can be who God created us to be. That's what those of us in the family of God believe. And I hope we believe that. And I hope we, speak that into the beloved without apologizing. And we even say to the unsaved person, I love you so much, I need to tell you the truth. I don't believe the journey you're on is healthy for you. You're trying to solve a mental health issue with a physical change, and it will not work well for you.
So I need to be honest with you. This was not a topic that I think that I wanted to address or even thought that we needed to address. But I do know that society and some major players in society are thinking that this is an actual reality. And in some ways, I think it's something that many people in the New Testament church were also dealing with. The cultural milieu that the whole church was actually founded in was a society that really challenged the reality of God in the world. Maybe not even of God, but of objective realities inside of the world that God had created. And as we close today, there's a passage that I want to look at from one of the early church members, John, who wrote a letter that explained some ways that I think he was calling the church to act in times of challenging realities. And so today I'm going to read from 1 John chapter 3, beginning at verse 16. And this is what John writes. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. I love this little segment that John writes. I think it's an encouragement for us. And when I say that, I really mean it. I think that it gives courage to us to live out not only the understanding of God's love that we have, the doctrine of love, the doctrine, the theology that we've been given and bestowed on us by the grace of God in our different church traditions. But I think this passage actually calls us to be people who live out this truth that we know inside of theology in actual deed and in actual speaking out against things that oppose themselves, falsehoods in the world. And so as we enter this weekend, may we be people who actively love our neighbors, and especially our neighbors that are challenged with the reality of what gender is, of what sexuality is. And I hope that that's an encouragement for you, especially as we go into this weekend. We don't need to be afraid of the dark because God's love and God's truth cuts through it. And he invites us into that grand story that he's weaving for all of creation. And I'm going to be honest, I really hope that is an encouragement for you. And on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, I want to say thanks for listening to this podcast every day. And you know what? We're really looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.